Hi, it's Karen Webster, and welcome to the PYMNTS.com digital discussion on bank innovation to discuss our Bank Innovation Readiness Index. First, a little context before we dive in. So hardly a day goes by without another headline describing the demise of banks as we know them. These stories are brought on, as you well know, by the rise of fintechs, digital from the ground up, who use new technologies and tools to drive what many describe as the great unbundling of the bank, particularly as it relates to payments, services, and capabilities. But at the same time, consumers still say that they trust their bank, especially now when the proliferation of connected devices now distributes payments and other banking services to many new connected endpoints, whether they be cars, wearables, or voice-activated speakers. So clearly, it's an exciting time, but one of great transition in which banks, big and small, are sizing up their resources to prepare for what's next. Now, the largest of the banks have the resources, the people, and the time to invest in enabling those payments initiatives, anticipating consumers' needs, and addressing them even before consumers may in fact know they have them. But we wondered whether the same held true for those that are not the biggest of the big, and that is in fact the study that we collaborated with I2C to find out. We're going to talk to you today about what we found when we talked to banks and bankers about not only what they're doing to innovate, but how prepared they feel they are to address what's next. So today, I'm delighted to be joined by Peg Johnson, the EVP of Global Customer Success from I2C. Peg, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, Karen, thanks for hosting me. I'm really excited about the next hour.
So I am too, and I think what's exciting about the conversation that we're going to have is not only the results themselves, but the insights that you can bring to them. You know, clearly we collaborated together on this, but you occupy a very special place at the intersection of issuing, acquiring, and all related financial services, given your expertise and the roles that you've played in the financial services industry. Maybe you could give us a little bit of insight on that before we dig in.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, thank you. It'd be my pleasure to introduce myself. Again, I'm Peg Johnson, and I have over 20 years in the payments industry. And I have just recently joined I2C. I've had the privilege of joining the family here of March of this year. And I have the privilege of running our customer success and service delivery teams for I2C. So what that means is it really gives me a bird's eye view on how financial institutions and card issuers are rolling out payment programs and how they integrate with new features and functionalities. I also have, I think, a pretty good pulse with regards to how to treat a client and what's important to a customer, whether it's a customer that buys services from I2C or our customers' clients. Everything that I've done in the last 20-plus years has been client-facing, so I really do understand the journey. Again, whether it's on the issuing side, the acquiring side, the prepaid side, or the operations side, kind of that end-to-end journey is what I'm most familiar with. And, of course, prior to coming to I2C, I had a very substantial role with another payments processor, and I left there in January of this year, and I couldn't be more excited to have joined the I2C family.
So thanks for that, Peg. Let's kind of dive in. I wanted to give everyone listening the top level of what we're going to cover in the next 45, 50 minutes or so. So clearly want to give you guys an understanding of what we did, the methodology, who we talked to, and so forth. A little peek at the top level findings, but to really drill into what our sample told us drives their innovation agenda, what holds it back, and what separates the top performers from those that are not. And I think that is very instructive in terms of offering calls to action on how to improve those efforts, whether you're a top performer or not. I think there's a lot of great insight to take away. So a little bit about the study itself. We did want to understand better, as I mentioned in the opening, the readiness of financial institutions to innovate, particularly as it relates to payments capability. And the way that we decided to do it was to look at a random sample of banks excluding the top 25. So we made the assumption that those guys are well situated to be able to address innovation as it comes along, but others may not be quite as ready to do that. So we actually didn't do a survey that was sent digitally. We talked to people. We talked to 214 bankers who run payments for their respective financial institutions and got their take on the answers to about 34 questions. So we made an investment of time in talking to them. They made an investment of time in talking to us, and that is really the baseline for the index itself and the report that we delivered. A little bit about the sample itself. I mentioned 214 different FIs, but it's a pretty interesting sample across the board by size and type of financial institutions. So we looked at the regional banks, we looked at the smaller commercial banks, of course, community banks, and credit unions. 22% of those we spoke with have assets in the $25 to $100 billion range, 42% in the $1 to $25 billion range, and then the rest were kind of on either ends of that spread. So I feel that we did get a good set of insights from a variety of players who share some common issues, but as you'll see, there are many ways in which they've differentiated in terms of investments made and capabilities that they've decided to prioritize. So in terms of top line, before I turn it over to Peg to dive in some of the specifics around the data itself and the insights, I wanted to give you the couple things that really struck me in reviewing the results. I think perhaps not a surprise to anyone listening, but very heartening to know that there's an intense focus on payments innovation in these financial institutions, without question. And the interesting dimension to that focus is that there's the investment to back it up. So this isn't just financial institutions saying, yes, 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 we want to innovate. It is, we want to innovate, we recognize the importance of innovation, and we're funding what it takes to actually drive those agendas forward. We also discovered that what separates kind of the wheat from the chaff is the ability of the core technologies to be very flexible. It's an enabler of successful innovation. When it's absent, you'll see later that it really does inhibit the ability of banks to do what they really want to do and what they know they need to do to keep up with consumer demand. And there is an interesting perspective and approach that differs by the size of the FI. Maybe that's not too surprising, but you'll see that that the larger banks and the smaller banks have similar agendas in terms of wanting to respond to consumer needs that exist today, but a bit of a different perspective on how they're actually deploying innovation to make that happen, features versus products, and we'll get into that in just a bit. So So Peg, I've kind of said my piece. I know that you're going to take us through the next couple of slides to drill down a bit and to add some color commentary. But let me pause and just get your reaction to what I've said so far.
Yeah. So, you know, it's going to be somewhat of my opening comments as well. You know, even though you're in the industry as long as you and I both have been, I think, you know, we all know logically that there's an intense focus on payments in the space and innovation, but this survey, it really hit home, to be quite frank, that it proves it, right? We all talk about it. We all, you know, sit around the water cooler and we chat about how we're going to get, right, to the next level. But I'm not sure in the past I've seen a survey such as this that was ever able to quantify what we all logically knew. So, you know, that was kind of a tale for me when I started to go through the data, seeing the responses, really, you know, taking a step back and really understanding what they said. We now have the data to prove things that have kind of been, you know, water cooler talk over the last many years.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I'll add that we've been in the business a long time, but we both started as children.
Right. So, well said.
so we'll make that point clear. But I think that's right, and you know, kudos to those who took the time to give us such great insight and such a candid assessment of the state of innovation within their organization. But drill in, help us navigate the data.
Yep, you got it. And just for operational definition purposes, right, I just want to make sure that our audience understands that innovation, it's defined in our survey as implementing new products or features for existing products. So I just wanted to make sure we have that level foundation as I go through the detail, kind of what that operational definition is. So let's go ahead and turn, we're on the next slide. So delivering new and innovative payment products, you know, it's a top priority. And 3% said they did not focus on payment innovation in the past years, only 3%. Again, an interesting percentage. I would say a takeaway that I gleaned from this particular slide is that institutions are highly focused on payment innovation, and they continually plan, they budget for even more so than what we've seen historically, and they're introducing new products more often, and of course adding new features to those existing products. So just looking at the data specifically, I'd say that 2/3, they're focused on delivering new products and features. In fact, 25% say they're focused on bringing new payment products to market. So what that means to me is that FIs, they're prioritizing payments, the payments innovation in their budget, right? Half of the banks that we interviewed say they have more funding allocated to payment innovation than any other products or services. And half, which is just roughly over 52% of the innovations, in the next 3 years will focus on payments technology. So, you know, I think about what does that mean to me or someone in the industry or someone, you know, getting into the market, that we should take away the key message that banks are focused on fueling their growth and differentiation. And payment innovation, again, that's defined as implementing new products or new features for existing products. It's central to their business. So on the next, I'm sorry?
No, before we go, I just wanted to add a quick comment to that, which is I think it's also a recognition that payments are now more strategic than ever. There's something that can, in fact, be a differentiator rather than just, you know, the necessary table stakes. Mm-hmm. So I think that was that for me was an interesting takeaway. But let's talk about what makes banks want to innovate and what maybe holds them back.
Yep, that's perfect. So, you know, the flexibility of let me just double check, of the infrastructure. So it's a primary factor, for leading to, in my opinion, successful innovation. So those FIs that we spoke to with flexible technology are twice as likely to say that the recent payment innovation efforts were extremely successful. So that's upwards of 70%. So just to say it again, that the FIs that have the flexible technology believe that they are successful in the payment space. So flip that around. On the other hand, 36% of banks say their IT systems makes innovation hard or very hard. So, again, the key message here is innovation, which we have known, but the data has proven, it's a market requirement, and flexibility is the key. And I would say, from coming from a previous processor to where I am today at I2C, I see and I feel and I hear every single day, because of the role that I have, just how important it is to have the flexibility to always be top of wallet. So again, I spend a lot of time, Karen, with, clients in all the different spaces, again, whether they're startups, whether they're fintechs, whether they're large banks, whether they're credit unions. And the most important resonating message that I continue to hear is that when a bank has the flexibility to roll something out in a timely fashion, right, clearly with no implementation issues, that is really what differentiates banks in this particular space.
Peg, a question for you when we say that, again, based on your experience in talking to FIs, when they say inflexible systems make innovation hard or very hard, does it mean that they don't do it, or it just costs more or takes longer? Maybe it's all of the above.
Again, a great question and such an intuitive one. So I would say it's a combination of, right? So if you think about, the legacy processors, a lot of what they've been able to accomplish is by bolting on systems. It's by buying technology. It's by buying companies, and that integration component just doesn't happen all that often, right? You think about it, you buy something new, you bolt something on, you have the best intentions, in my opinion, to streamline, to integrate, but competing priorities, right, that integration falls to the bottom and something else falls to the top. So when you have bolt-on systems, when you don't have one core payments processing system, it becomes cumbersome, and not only to make sure the data goes from one system to the other, it's incredibly time-intensive and it's expensive, right, to be able to ensure all the systems are upgraded. So I would say it's bolting on. I'd say time to develop with legacy processing systems could be anywhere, even for something as simplistic as a new feature on an existing product, could be upwards of 6 to 8 months, maybe even over a year. And it's expensive as well. So I think the data shows that it's a wake-up call for our industry. It's funny when I talk to Amr about it. It's about survival now, right? I've seen this every single day in my previous jobs and in my current jobs, and the technical components, the platforms, we have to be able to support it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, that is interesting. To add a feature takes 8 months. Yep. That's tough in a world that's moving at the speed of digital these days. So let's talk a little bit about what is driving the need for innovation from a product features perspective. So I thought this was interesting insight too. I'll let you begin.
Thank you, and I too felt it insightful. But the great news is the top two, really the top three don't surprise me, right? If you think about what's important to a customer or their customers, it is all about their journey, right? So meeting customer needs, keeping pace with changing consumer behavior, and just catching up to that digital mobile market, they're all imperatives. And I know I said this a few minutes ago, but they're imperative to being top of wallet. So what that means to me is if you don't keep the clients top of mind with their needs, you don't deliver swiftly, you can't roll out things swiftly to the market, it's expensive to do so, that card, whether it's a prepaid card, a debit card, a credit card, falls to not the first card in your wallet, whether that's a digital wallet or, a wallet you have in your handbag. So you have to absolutely keep what the customer needs as top of mind. And then I would say too, right, 33% of reports that they need to catch up on the digital market needs, which is a little bit greater than what I thought the statistics would come back at, but it does not surprise me.
So the thing that I think is interesting is the top bar, protect the base is basically what that says to me.
That's right.
Protect the base.
And you have to, right? The reality of the market that we're in, the payment space, is it's great to get new clients, right? I get that. It's great to get, that helps with top-line revenue growth, but you have to protect and you have to take care of your existing clients, again, clients and their clients. That's paramount in the customer space. You can't forget kind of where you started is the way that I would articulate that. And I'll tell you, right, what I've learned, over the course of the many years is that, customers are predictable, right, with the right loyalty programs, the right flexible systems, the drive to new features, to existing products, best-in-class service, you absolutely then will be top of mind. So on this point, innovation now is a necessity of doing business. It's, in my opinion, it's not just a nice to have, it's an absolute must.
I think the other thing that's interesting on this particular page is the 50%, which is about keeping up with changing customer behavior, which I think also reflects digital market catch-up. I mean, it is clearly the case that the expectation that consumers have is the ability to deal with their bank, large or small, in a digital fashion. So it's you start to put all these breadcrumbs together. There's an appetite for innovation. Infrastructure that's flexible really matters, because what the FIs are telling us is they need to satisfy existing customers and worry about not losing them because of their inability to meet them in the digital landscape that they definitely want to play in.
Yep. Yeah, and great point again. And on digital market catch-up, surprisingly a lot of focus here by larger FIs, right? If you think about what this slide is telling us, again, I would think it'd be a little bit differently, but it really doesn't surprise me as we continue to talk that a lot of the larger FIs are on legacy platforms as well, and we just talked about time to market, expense, and I think it drives exactly what the data is telling us.
Let's move on to the competition, because I think this is another tale of, I guess, two worries. The results of the study on who FIs perceive as their competition. Why don't you dig in?
So if you recall, right, and just for our audience, the top findings was size does matter on how banks view our competition. And, the marketplace in consumer payments and banking, as we've just discussed, is incredibly competitive. So the perspective on competition changes depending on the size of the bank. So smaller banks, right, our credit unions, they view their peers and the local banks and regional banks as their competitors, which, again, in my opinion, from being around for a while, it's that demographic or that space, those credit unions, those local banks, those regional banks, they deploy a very high-touch model. You know, I still today, just personally, I still bank with my credit union. I've banked with them for 100 years, just for the simple fact is I enjoy that. I enjoy they know me, they know my name, I can walk in, and it's not a large FI. But switching to the larger banks, from what we gleaned from them, and that's exceeding around $100 billion, and they're more forward-looking. They see their competition primarily from the larger peers and fintech companies. So nearly 50% view fintech companies as their top competitors. So I would say in today's market, right, delivering innovative solutions that make it easy for customers to access and use their payment products, you know, probably it's table stakes. You know, I know that those words are used a lot in our industry, but the reality is it is a must today, and again, it's the cost of doing business.
Hey, a question on you know, sort of the tale of two competitive stories. The smaller guys, you know, it's the bank across the street. It's the big guys that have more resources potentially to provide. But you know, the larger banks that are worried about the fintech, is this back to the unbundling of the bank where there are fintechs that can peel off certain aspects of financial services and payments that can be satisfied by those players, not displacing all of banking services, but clearly some of the ones that they've grown up to fine-tune and develop in a particular aspect of financial services or payments?
Yeah, Karen, what you said was spot on. That's exactly the reality of fintechs and why they are kind of approaching those larger banks, and the larger banks are more intimidated by them, as well as if you think about what a fintech company can do, they have a lot of flexibility in their system. So I go back to, you know, kind of the key message of having that flexible infrastructure, right, that allows you to develop more swiftly, kind of in an agile methodology, helps yield the results that a bank would want. And if you think about it too, right, smaller banks, they need to pay attention to the bigger guys just due to the sheer risk of customer erosion. So again, right, that flexible platform that allows you to, you know, retain your local customers, it really matters, right? Someone's coming for your customers, whether they're big FIs, whether they're fintechs, whether they're startups, right? Smaller FIs are at the biggest risk here.
Yep. Yeah. No, that's. I think that's true. Particularly when we go back to the infrastructure point, where they're not always able to make the decisions to change themselves directly. So let's move on to the differences in focus with respect to what the innovation agenda looks like based on size of FI. What did we learn?
Perfect. So what we learned here, again, insightful. That, you know, new products versus feature functionality, it also does vary with the size of the institution. So, you know, what we learned, again, larger banks focus more on rolling out new products and digital innovation. So the larger bank, you know, they're more likely that they were to report that their last innovation focused on something new versus adding a feature to an already existing product. And I'd say smaller banks, they said they were quick to catch up, right? Their words, not mine, with larger bank competitors. And they're focusing more on adding new features to already those existing products that are in the market. Again, hence the true need to ensure that if you are adding feature functionality to something new, you can do that swiftly before that local customer decides to do something or go someplace else. So I would say, again, the foundation of, the last few slides is, technology, in my opinion, it absolutely can level the playing field and make banks of any size, right, small or large, more agile.
I guess I'm not surprised. It's probably always been this way, right? That the bigger guys are always the first to develop new products, and then there's the wave of everyone else that adapts that particular flavor of product to their customer set. I guess that's always been indicative of the way it's worked. So that part didn't so much surprise me as much as the I guess feeling the time pressure to do this more quickly is, I think, one of the insights and nuances that I took away from this. It isn't as if they always expect to be first, but fast follower means fast, not not 3 years from the time that something new has been introduced.
Right, exactly. And I would say to that exact point that really, if you take a step back, there's really no reason a smaller FI can innovate first if they have a flexible program, right? That's what differentiates, in my opinion, the smaller guys from the larger guys. If the smaller guys don't have something that's flexible where they can catch up, then it's going to be a problem, and they're going to attrit their customers, which again, right, could in turn have them close their doors, right? You see all day, every day, you drive anywhere, new smaller credit unions, local banks, some are popping up new, and some, some are closing their doors. So that's why I would say, right, this is the shift that the smaller FIs must make and move from the legacy technology.
It's a really good point, and I think it's a great segue to what are these FIs doing? So this is a bit of an eye chart, but there are a lot of bars on this chart, and there are a lot of small print, but I think we can get the focus here. So what are the FIs doing when they're designing their roadmaps and they're actually deploying innovation? What is the centerpiece of what they're doing? So Peg, take it away.
All right. So I would say, let's talk about what the survey yielded, and then I want to talk about kind of the sandbox methodology as well. So, the last 3 years, it was a diverse range of new innovation. So whether it was, digital wallets, P2P payments, fraud management, and loyalty, that really rounded out the top 4. But what is, most interesting is, just north of 54% of who we spoke to will focus on payment technology. And if you think about what that means in our space, right, whether it's contactless, whether it's in-authorization events, which is a really cool feature, mobile remote deposit capture, that's really where the market is heading. And if you think about who's really utilizing this technology, it's some of the millennials, it's people that expect that this is what we focus on. This is the table stakes. It's not something that's nice to have anymore. And I would say, with regards to what banks are doing is, and just looking at the last 10 months that I've been at I2C, right, it's a sandbox to do this. We'll find out later about this, but it really helps with the de-risks of the innovation.
So can you, I'm conscious of our time because we've got a couple of other things to get through, but what exactly is the relationship between what you just said and deploying all of these various new payments technologies?
Yeah, so you mean the relationship in how they will do it?
Well, you mentioned the sandbox to scale dimension of innovation.
Yep. So what I would say is sandbox to scale. You know, what I mean by that is the ability to test a solution in kind of a sandbox environment are part of the payments, you know, processing environment that's really not live in the market. But what it does is it's designed specifically for testing and redefining new solutions or feature functionality. So if you think about it, it can be used to test a feature to a subset of customers or users, right? It's to move incredibly swift. It de-risks, right? It de-risks it, and you work at market speed. So if you have that foundation of sandbox, it really, the key message is it delivers the ability to test new ideas and solutions and ultimately be able to redefine them. I would say that's not common in our industry. I've grown up in the space. I have a lot of friends in the space, and I'll tell you, even the clients that I've worked with in my past don't have this methodology. So it is new. It's innovative, and I truly believe it's a market differentiator.
Is it a methodology or is it a technology? So it's an environment, right?
Yeah, it's an environment.
Okay, got it. And
yeah.
And why is it missing?
Yeah, so I would say that it's expensive at times to be able to have this type of environment for all clients. I'll tell you, in addition to that, when you have bolt-on either companies or loyalty programs or rewards programs, when everything is bolted on, it's really hard to test in that particular environment, right? So the brilliance of a global platform will yield the ability to be able to do this. So that's why I would say a lot of the legacy technologies were never built to do this, right? They're essentially, and I say this with the utmost respect, static systems, very different than what we see today.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and it's the kind of thing that if you were building it from scratch today, you wouldn't build it that way, but that's how that's how things have grown up, and now we just need to figure out how to enable this kind of an environment so that the banks we're talking about are well positioned to innovate successfully. We spent some time talking about impediments to success with the lack of this testing environment, but there are others that were cited as well. Help us understand, put some context around other barriers to success, Peg.
Sure. So, the top two, and again, a little bit of an eye chart, are not surprising at all to me, right? From a compliance and regulatory perspective, whether you're a fintech, whether you're a CU, whether you're a large FI, everybody, right, is directionally on the same playing field, and it's a common variable that all banks have little control over. So I would say, though, what we learned from this particular question is for the areas that banks do have more control over, technology is the leading culprit. So 30% of banks today say inflexible technology systems are their barrier to innovation. So in fact, right, looking at the data, 40% say that core payments processing systems, they hindered their innovation efforts. So lack of organizational agility, difficulty in measuring kind of the return of investment, and speed to market are all the major barriers. So, what we've just discussed, the previous 12, 13 slides, this really shows us with data behind, what we all believed. We recognize that it's the core payment processing system that is causing the most angst in this space.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was chatting with the head of payments for the American Bankers Association. He zeroed in on that particular statistic, and took it to heart and suggested that this was a call to action. Particularly as it relates to the smaller FIs that want to innovate, have budget to innovate, but have some impediments that, unfortunately, they're not in a position today with their current circumstances to do. So it's an interesting finding that I guess is an important takeaway and certainly a call to action. So
yeah, and I would say, before we move, Karen, to the next one, just one more point on this slide, because you just, again, brought up a really good point. I think the other key message, as I heard your words, is it really shows the industry that you have to have the will and the ability to innovate, right? You have to have the interest to want to do that, to be able to get past these barriers. So sorry to interrupt you in that. I just wanted to make sure that I made that point.
Yeah, no, I think that is a good point. So we're going to kind of segue we're going to wrap up this piece of it and segue into a little bit of statistical analysis on top and not so top performers. But wrapping up, Peg, give us the top line on what makes innovation successful, at least as we've discovered so far.
Yeah. So, this doesn't have a lot of data on it, but I would tell you, and people that know me, I use the words, this is the money slide. This really shows what we were able to glean from the people that we spoke to prove maybe what we've known. So in order to be top of wallet, right, in order to ensure that your brand is the first one a consumer will pull out or recognize, you have to have a processor that has a flexible platform. You have to have the luxury of speed to market. You absolutely have to have that. And I think you have to have a partner that has the will and the ability to show that they're good in this particular space. So core systems that are flexible, innovations, they have to be well-funded, and we heard, right, that in the next 3 years, the people that we spoke to are spending a lot of money in this space, and that innovation isn't just a nice to have. It's a must, and it's really the foundational element of doing business and being competitive, right, and retaining customers in the payment space.
So let me set up the next couple of slides that drill into the top performers and those who aren't as fortunate. So we gathered tens of thousands of data points, and as I mentioned, 34, 35 questions for each of these interviews that we had. And it gave us a lot of opportunity to do cross-tabulations and all the analysis that we saw so far just based on the answers to the survey questions. But we really wanted to do some statistical analysis to better determine what separates the top performers from those who underperform. And I won't bore you with the whole statistical jargon methodology, but the shorthand is we used techniques to evaluate all of these attributes and predict the likelihood that an innovation would be successful based on the subset of factors that we determined do in fact make the difference between a top performer and a bottom performer. We scored and we ranked each of those attributes to kind of get to the bushel basket of top performing and bottom performing FIs, and we go into detail in the report itself as to how we did that. But broadly speaking, there are a few things that distinguish the top from the bottom. And not surprisingly, the top performers are certainly at the leading edge of innovation. So these are the guys and gals that are developing the products that are, in fact, at the tip of the spear when it comes to innovation. They're obviously also more likely to get more funding for the innovations that they are putting on their roadmap and looking to deploy in market. They're faster, so they actually get their innovations out on time and before the competition, obviously quite important on both of those scores, before the competition and on time, and in a time frame that's relevant. So, you know, time is only as good as getting it out into the market when the need is there and the opportunity to seize that particular innovation is present, and the top performers, in fact, have exhibited those characteristics. And I think, you know, without beating the infrastructure horse to death anymore, but it was, in fact, one of the things that came out of the statistical analysis that proved to be a differentiator, and it is one of the reasons why we are emphasizing it. You know, more than 70% of those at the top performing band do have a processing system that accommodates their appetite for innovation and their ability to actually execute and get it into the market faster and in a timely fashion, and without a lot of the expense and agita that fighting with inflexible systems can create. So I'm gonna let you, Peg, take it away the next couple of slides here, where we get into some of the things that are specifically called out from the top and the bottom guys. So take it away.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. And, you know, just the innovation, you know, completing innovations more quickly, 90% roll out new products before their competition, which is an interesting statistic, too, on that previous slide. So now talking about key functionality, again, interesting data as we reviewed it. So we all know there are key features in the payment processing technology, right, that enable customers to be innovative. So one is multifunction, right? So what that means is it's the ability to run any program, whether that's debit, credit, prepaid, on one platform, rather than, again, what we've talked about, running different programs on different platforms bolted together. So 69% of the survey respondents do not, and I say that again, do not have this capability. And the configurability and the flexibility, the ability to drive quickly or make changes to programs to scale them to market. So almost 70% don't have that flexibility today, and just north of 70% say that their processing system is not configurable. So, you know, another striking finding is 40% of the top performers use what we just discussed a couple of minutes ago, this sandbox, to test new functionality, to make changes, and then they get innovation to the market. Again, as we discussed, I think it's missing in the payments processing platforms today, and I can confirm that because 83, just north of 83% of the people that we interviewed said that they don't have that today. So, you know, what that resonates to me is they don't have an environment to test change, to iterate new innovations and feature functionality, and then, you know, help them to scale to market. But what we do see is when we plan for innovation, top performers do these things more than the average bank. They continue to, you know, listen to their customers' feedback. They test products and features with their customers and their employees, which then again, you know, helps them in the long run. So I truly believe, and I could talk about this for hours, we only have 8 minutes left, but sandbox functionality is a critical tool to do this.
So I want to spend a little bit of time on the next slide, which is, you know, we've given everyone a tremendous amount of data. We have, the entire set of results in the report itself. But let's be constructive and let's put together kind of a call to action around what we've just spent the last 50 minutes or so discussing. So, Peg, what's your advice?
Yeah, you got it. So first and foremost, I would say the industry must move on and realize that innovation cannot be done in a lab. I think that's a key finding of what I was able to understand from the data and all the conversations that we've had. I also will say that, we need to focus on payments innovation to keep pace with customer expectations and the mounting competition, right? We absolutely need to make sure that, any bank has the flexible core technology. That's a key enabler, in my opinion, of successful innovation. Just because the bigger and the smaller banks may have a different approach in their perspective, and each of them have implications, I'm not being facetious when I say technology can help. It can absolutely help level that playing field. So when the market's changing rapidly, in my opinion, your job, our audience's job, our clients' jobs are to really be ready for what's next. You need the tools, the technology to allow you to roll out products and services that the market needs. And one more time, and I promise I won't beat this dead horse much longer, but technology is the game changer, right? Most FIs, they rely on legacy processing technology that was designed a long, long time ago. And, that doesn't sync up, in my opinion, with today's needs or, to be quite frank, tomorrow's needs. So I would say innovation differentiates. It can be incremental, and those are the key takeaways that I would leave with our audience. I'd also say that since we did share a lot of information over the course of the last 55 minutes, we should encourage our audience to download the Bank Innovation Readiness Index. And again, for those of you that know me in the industry, just a couple of housekeeping notes. My ghostwriter made it very clear to me that I needed to read this verbatim. So we'll be publishing a series of practical how-to guide playbooks on different aspects of payment agility, with the first one on top-performing innovating FIs and what you can learn from them coming out within the next couple of weeks. You can also access the index report and more information on PYMNTS.com. I would also say if you haven't had the opportunity to download the Innovation Index, it's really easy to find. You go to PYMNTS.com, the website, you'll see Resource Center in the navigation bar. Bank Innovation is right at the top, so click on it, and you can download the index. PYMNTS.com will be posting the Payments Agility Playbook Series here as well. So with that being said, Karen, I want to turn it back to you for closing comments and a thank you for allowing me to share my insights and allowing I2C to participate jointly in this survey. I learned a ton, and I hope that our audience will feel the same. So back to you.
Thanks, Peg. I think that was a great wrap-up. I guess a couple things that, when you live in this data, we've been looking at it for a very long time, and every time you look at it, you get another nuance that kind of jumps out that is important to throw onto the pile of insights. And two things that are on this slide that I think are also really important is, we talk about innovation, and often that means you have to be the shiny object in order to be innovative. And I think we've learned that incremental improvements, whether it be in how users access a service or a feature that makes something easier, that can be as transformative as the shiny new object, which I was joking with someone earlier today, can often get left in the right hand dresser drawer when the novelty has worn off. So I think, you know, keep that in mind as you're thinking about innovation and how to think about planning for it and describing innovation within your organization. I think assessing the strengths and gaps, that's an exercise that is, you know, very much a soul search of the organization to be very clear on what the customers think of you, the trust that they have in you, what your core strengths are, and then using all the tools that we described to create the kinds of innovations that then capitalize on those strengths, recognizing that obviously there will be gaps that need to be filled as well. But you know, don't try to be something that you're not. Be something that you can be based on the core strengths that you have. And I think there's a lot of great opportunity with some of the techniques and environments, Peg, that you've talked about to play around in a safe place to see what that combination really is. And those agility playbooks that you talked about, you know, we've identified a number of things based on this study that we want to drill into and provide very useful advice on just how to do it. So, you know, not just talking about it, but providing some very constructive insight and information about how to execute, since that is what it's all about. Ideas are a dime a dozen, good roadmaps are a dime a dozen, but it's getting into the market in a way that's meaningful that really makes a difference. So that's what I have to say. Haig, thanks for being a good partner on the discussion today. I hope it was fun for you. It was enjoyable for me.
It was awesome. So thank you very much. And just, you know, closing for me, you know, realizing, you know, everything that you just spoke about must become, it's just part of normal course of doing business, right? It's really not optional. I think that's exactly kind of, you know, your message as well, that innovation is as much about keeping pace as it's about differentiation. And in order to be successful, again, in Peg Johnson's opinion, you have to do both. The market's expecting that due to mobile and social factors in the new real-time economy. So thank you again, Karen. It was hugely beneficial for me and such a joy to have this conversation today.
Thanks, Peg, and thanks everyone who joined us today. We will have a replay of this and an archive of this discussion on PYMNTS.com in the next couple of days, so you can go back and refresh your memory. And then don't forget to download the Bank Innovation Index. It's an awesome report. I think you'll really enjoy it. But thanks again for joining us today, and everyone have a great rest of the day and a good week. Bye-bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.